Okay, so I know what you're thinking. Mr. Thompson, that's a lot of times going to Wendy's, and that's a lot of nuggets. But if you've ever tried Wendy's Spicy McNuggets, you really wouldn't be asking that question. But anyways, let's talk a little bit about the problem. So in this particular case, and in all word problems, it's a good thing to start out with thinking about what we know. So in this particular problem, we know that I went to Wendy's 37 times. And the other big piece of information that we know is that every time I went there, and I like to write this keyword as each, and I'm going to underline that because that's an important word. Each time that I went there, I got 40 nuggets. And I wrote down that keyword as each because each is a very, very, very important word in this particular case because the first thing you should think of when you see that word each is multiplication because that's what we're talking about in this particular case. The reason for that, we can think of it like this. The first time I went, I got 40 nuggets. The second time, I got 40 nuggets. The third time, I got 40 nuggets. And dot, 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 over and over. We can think of that as the same thing as 40 plus 40 plus 40 plus 40 plus 40. And you can think of that as happening 37 times because that's how many times I went there. And every single time I got those 40 McNuggets. So we often think of multiplication as repeated addition. But anyways, let's talk about actually solving the problem. So our problem is going to look like this. 37 times 40. When we do that, the very first thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at multiplying by this ones digit here. Well, in this case, you're just really thinking of multiplying 37 times 0, which is pretty easy because anything times 0 is obviously going to give us 0. So the first part there is pretty easy. So after we've multiplied by the ones place, we're going to move on to multiplying by the tens place. In this case, we have a 4 in the tens place. So what we're actually looking at here is 37 times. When you see that 4 in the tens place, you're thinking 40. So we're actually looking at 37 times 40. When you multiply any number by a number in the tens place, for instance, when you multiply 10 times 2, you get 20. 10 times 6, you get 60. I could even do 20 times 6 and get 120. Notice every single time you always have that 0 in the ones place when you multiply anything, any factor of 10 by a whole number. So for that reason, when we work this problem, and we already had our 0 here, when we work this problem and we're moving on to multiplying by the tens, we're always every single time going to go ahead and put a 0 there in the ones place because now that we're multiplying by the tens, we already know that we're going to have a 0 in that ones place. So now we can just move on and multiply our 10 factor by each thing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply this 4 by 7, which is really a 40 by 7. And 4 times 7 is 28. So I'm going to put an 8 down, which is like 80. And I'm going to put my 2 up here, which is like 200. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do 4 times 3. And 4 times 3 is 12. Plus my 2 up here, which will give me 14. So I'm going to put my 14 down here. Normally, I would have to add the sum of 37 times 0 plus 37 times 40. But in this particular case, this bottom number is actually just my answer because my ones digit was a 0 here. So I'm going to get a final answer of 1,480. So that's pretty much how we're going to multiply, and I could figure out that in one weekend I had 1,480 McNuggets, which is pretty good. Um, so just make sure you remember those few things when you're multiplying. Make sure you're thinking about why we're putting down that zero, and make sure you're thinking about that word each, meaning multiplication. So good luck with your multiplication, and I will see you back here next time.